You are sitting in a room. The walls are a neutral, inoffensive shade of beige. Across from you is a television, muted, showing a local news broadcast about a local pumpkin festival. Next to it sits a plastic fern that has been gathering dust since the Carter administration. On the wall hangs a round, analog clock. You came in to get a simple signature on a document. It is a minor task that should take exactly 3 minutes. Yet, 40 minutes later, you are still sitting on a fabric chair that is slightly too firm, listening to the muffled whispers of strangers, experiencing a quiet, existential crisis. You feel as though you have been trapped in this room for half of your adult life. We have all been here. The clinic, the bank, the DMV, the corporate reception desk. These are the physical transition spaces of modern society, waiting rooms. On paper, a waiting room is just a waiting area, a neutral chamber where you wait for a service to begin. But once you sit down, the physics of the room change. It is no longer just a space. It is a sensory deprivation tank designed to strip your brain of the very tools it uses to measure reality. Waiting rooms don't just feel slow. They are built to systematically break your perception of time. To understand why this happens, we have to look inside your skull. Your brain does not have a clock. It has no physical gear or ticking mechanism that measures the passage of seconds. Instead, neuroscientists explain that our brain estimates time using an internal metronome, a pacemaker that constantly fires neural pulses, or ticks, and an accumulator that counts them. When your brain wants to estimate how much time has passed, it simply reads the counter. If the counter has registered 100 ticks, you assume a minute has passed. But your internal metronome does not run at a constant speed. It is highly sensitive to your biology. When you enter a waiting room, two forces collide: boredom and anxiety. You are anxious about the outcome of your appointment, and you are intensely bored by the lack of stimulation. This combination triggers a release of cortisol, your stress hormone. Cortisol acts like a physical accelerator on your internal metronome, forcing it to fire ticks rapidly. Suddenly, your brain is generating 3 times as many ticks per second as it does when you are relaxed. Your counter registers 3,000 ticks, and your brain reports to your conscious mind. Surely an hour must have passed. You look down at your phone. It has only been 4 minutes. The moment you realize how slowly time is moving, you make a critical cognitive error. You start paying attention to the time itself. Our brain has a limited pool of attention. When you are busy assembling a piece of flat-pack furniture, your attention is focused on the instructions, the screws, and the wood. The cognitive gate to your internal counter is closed, allowing only a few ticks to slip through. Time flies because you aren't paying attention to it. But in a waiting room, there is nothing to focus on. Your attention pool is empty. So, your brain directs all its resources toward the clock. The gate swings wide open. Every single neural tick generated by your accelerated metronome slips through, and you count every single one of them. You are literally inflating the time bubble yourself. As you stare at the wall clock, trying to force it to move, you experience a visual glitch called chronostasis. You look at the red second hand. For a split second, it seems to freeze. It hangs in the air, defying gravity, taking what feels like 2 seconds to make its first move. This stopped clock illusion occurs because during a rapid eye movement, a saccade, your brain temporarily cuts off the visual feed to prevent your world from looking like a motion-blurred video. To prevent you from noticing this blank gap, your brain performs a retroactive edit. It takes the first clear image your eyes see after the movement and stretches it backward in time to fill the empty space. Your visual cortex is lying to you, retroactively extending the duration of the first frame you see. The more frequently you check the clock, the more stretched seconds your brain creates. You look away from the clock, seeking comfort from the receptionist. But you are blocked by a physical barrier. A high, solid wooden desk, or a thick, sliding glass window. This is the beginning of the room's physical trap. In design psychology, this layout immediately designates you as a supplicant, a person asking for a favor while placing the staff in a position of control. The moment you lose control over your environment, your locus of control shifts from internal to external. Evolutionarily, a human who is trapped in a space with zero control over their fate enters a state of low-level alarm. Your heart rate rises, your cortisol spikes, and your internal metronome accelerates even further. You sit back down, looking at the chair arrangement. Supermarket aisles are designed to guide your feet, but waiting rooms are designed to paralyze them. The chairs are almost always arranged in a peripheral layout, lined up side by side along the walls, facing a large, empty center. This is the bus stop design. It is chosen because it prevents awkward, direct eye contact with strangers. But it has a side effect. It forces you to face the empty center of the room. The architecture highlights the absolute lack of activity. There is nothing to look at but empty space, reinforcing the message that nothing is happening, and you are stuck. To make matters worse, the room is filled with a heavy, self-policing silence. Because the space is institutional, people speak only in hushed whispers. This artificial quietness amplifies the ambient sounds of the room, the squeak of a shoe, the click of a pen, the hum of the fluorescent light. Every sound becomes an event, dragging your attention back to the environment, making it impossible for your mind to wander and escape the passage of time. This state of passive waiting is what Harvard business theorist David Maister called unoccupied time. And in the psychology of waiting, unoccupied time is the enemy of sanity. Consider a famous story from the Houston Intercontinental Airport. Passengers were complaining about waiting 7 minutes for their luggage. The airport authorities tried to hire more baggage handlers to speed up the process, but the reduction in wait time was minimal and extremely expensive. So, they tried a different approach. They moved the arrival gates further away from the baggage carousel. Instead of walking for 1 minute and standing still for 7 minutes, passengers now walked for 6 minutes and stood still for 2 minutes. The total time from the plane to the luggage remained exactly 8 minutes, yet the complaints dropped to 0. Why? Because walking is occupied time. It gives the brain a physical task and a visual sense of progress toward a goal, satisfying our evolutionary need for movement. Standing still is unoccupied time, which turns the brain inward to count the seconds. To combat this unoccupied time, waiting room designers use a series of distractions. The most famous is the Waiting Room magazine, usually a sports weekly from 3 years ago, or a travel magazine featuring destinations you will never visit. Even if the articles are boring, flipping the pages is a physical task. It occupies your hands and eyes, closing the attentional gate just enough to slow down the accumulator. In some offices, you will find a fish tank. This is not for the fish. Watching fish swim in a slow, non-repetitive, organic pattern is a classic example of soft fascination in attention restoration theory. Unlike a television screen, which blasts your brain with fast cuts and stressful news, a fish tank captures your attention gently. It lowers your blood pressure, slows your heart rate, and calms your autonomic nervous system, pulling your internal metronome back to a normal speed. If the receptionist wants to make the wait feel even shorter, they will use the action illusion. Instead of telling you to sit down and do nothing, they will hand you a clipboard with a 4-page medical history form. This form is the physical equivalent of the Houston Airport Walk. It gives you a task. You are checking boxes, writing your address, and recalling your childhood surgeries. You feel like you are actively participating in the process. Psychologically, you have transitioned from pre-process waiting, which feels endless, to in-process waiting, which feels like progress. Even if the doctor doesn't see you for another 20 minutes, your brain registers the wait as having started the moment you picked up the pen. But why does this slow time actually make us so angry? David Maister explained this using a simple psychological equation. Satisfaction equals perception minus expectation. If you expect to wait 10 minutes, but you are called in 8, you walk out happy. If you expect a 0-minute wait and you wait 5, you are furious. This is why theme parks like Disney deliberately pad the wait times on their display boards. If the sign outside a roller coaster says, "Wait time, 60 minutes," but you reach the front in 45, your brain receives a massive hit of dopamine. You feel like you won 15 minutes of free time, even though you still spent 3/4 of an hour standing in a queue. But your patience is also governed by the perceived value of the service. We will wait 3 hours in an emergency room to see a specialized surgeon without complaining, but we will lose our minds if a fast food register takes 4 minutes to hand us a burger. Your brain constantly calculates a value-to-cost ratio. If the value of the outcome is high, the brain accepts the wait as a fair transaction and suppresses the stress response. If the value is low, the wait feels like a social insult, triggering anger and focusing your attention on the clock. As you sit in the room, you might notice the air temperature is slightly cold. This is not a mistake by the building manager. Waiting rooms are often kept at a cool, air-conditioned temperature because of a biological link between temperature and time. In 1933, physiologist Hudson Hoagland ran an experiment on his wife, who had a high fever. He noticed that when her body temperature was high, she estimated a minute had passed much faster than it actually had. Her internal clock was running hot. Cooler room temperatures slow down your body's metabolic rate and lower your heart rate. By physically cooling you down, the room is subtly slowing your internal metronome, helping to compress your perception of the wait. As you sit in the cold room, the door opens and another patient walks in. They look around and sit down 3 chairs away from you. Instantly, you feel a subtle sense of relief. You are no longer the last person in the room. In behavioral economics, this is called last place aversion. Humans have a deep psychological aversion to being in the worst possible position in a social group. When you are the only person waiting, you feel the full weight of the queue. The moment someone else sits down behind you, you are no longer in last place. Your social status has risen, your anxiety drops, and the wait feels less painful. Finally, the door opens. The receptionist calls your name. You stand up, walk through the door, get your signature, and leave the building. As you walk out into the parking lot, something strange happens. The 40-minute wait that felt like a lifetime in the moment suddenly shrinks in your memory. A week later, you will barely remember it at all. This is the time paradox of memory. Because nothing happened in that room, your brain recorded no new memories. When you look back at the day, your brain scans its memory storage, finds an empty space, and concludes, nothing happened there, so it must have been a very short period. Perspective time, the time you feel in the moment, is stretched by attention. Retrospective time, the time you remember, is compressed by the lack of memory data. The next time you find yourself stuck in a waiting room, staring at a dusty plastic plant, sitting on a chair that is slightly too firm, and listening to the hum of the muted television reporting on the Pumpkin Festival, don't blame your patience. Remember that you are sitting inside a carefully constructed machine. A machine designed to isolate your attention, speed up your biology, and trap your mind in the eternal present. The room is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and the clock on the wall is in no hurry at all. If you want to understand more about the hidden systems of daily life, subscribe, because next time we'll dissect the hidden geometry of a chair you've sat on 100 times, and why the furniture itself is quietly begging you to get up and run.